Rock and roll. Well, Claire, we're recording. What's up? Thank you so much for coming on my show.
No worries. A nice last minute guest appearance.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a funny way to start a podcast, but I have to give you a compliment in that I legitimately think that you have my favorite Twitter feed on like all of the internet. I don't know if that's something that like you try to do or you
No.
tried in, but there's two things. One, the video that you did of it was just recently, it might have been a couple hours ago. I was laughing so hard I showed it to my wife of the person trying to cut open the tissue box. I was like, look at that piece of cake.
I follow some great people on Twitter who come up with wonderful content. I can't take credit. I'm basically a retweeter who throws in like videos of my son every now and then.
Well, okay, and then perfect. And then because that was the next thing I was going to say, and I hope this is more of a compliment. Usually when there's like kid pictures online, I'm like, yeah, we get it. You love your kid, but your kid is freaking adorable. I'm
right?
serious.
I'm really glad we didn't get an uggo. So
an ugly baby, right? Because that'd be terrible, especially if you like know it's an ugly baby. What are you gonna do? Deny it?
Exactly. No, he's right up there with being one of the cutest kids I've ever met. So, I'm really glad that we've produced him.
I am too. I am from my Twitter.
Quality. He's a lot of work.
Quality?
I tell you what. Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, I'm like really thrilled to have this conversation because this is the first time that you and I have like actually talked. And I've said this a few times to people in the past with Copy Blogger, but it's like kind of feel like I know you a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, you're now in the Copy Blogger circle, and I feel even though I've moved on, it's still a circle. We all know each other globally.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway.
So there's a lot of stuff that I want to get to because although that, like you said, you might have moved on from that, I still follow your newsletter and I know that that's something that you work really, really hard on. And so I wanted to talk about that. But beforehand, I always try to just get to the story. I know it's a journey to get into the place where you were, where you're creating content and sharing your ideas. So a little bit like open-ended, how did you get involved with Copy Blogger in the first place? Like how did that even become to be?
I mean, honestly, Copy Blogger was right at the beginning of, like when you first discover online business. I mean, we all sort of have that. Well, I certainly have that moment in my life where I was really fed up with my job and just was searching for anything. And I remember I bought a course and it was called Loving Not Working. And then it was just, sort of just one sort of big sort of 10,000 foot view of what you can do online. And I remember she had, the course instructor, she had one really good tip, and it was to go check out Brian's ebook, Magnetic Headlines, which is still available, I'm pretty sure, or at least going to be re-released. And that led me straight into Copy Blogger. And I don't think I ever really looked back from learning from them. And so that catalyst, that taste of Copy Blogger obviously just sunk me into their world. And that was in 2015. I finally, in those next 2 years, built up a bit of courage, built up my content creation skills. Sure. And I remember I pitched Brian on a guest post, not for Copy Blogger, for Further. Mm-hmm. And he said yes. And I wrote the post, and that was sort of where our more personal relationship built up. And obviously at that point he had Further, he had Unemployable, and he had Copy Blogger. And I was sort of writing for Further and helping him out, just, sort of VA wise or project management wise for Unemployable. And then, they went through that really big, when they sold off Studio Press, that sort of transition period, I think they had a bit of staff turnover at the same time. And Brian literally called me up one day and he was like, I have a job for you if you're interested. And I can say this now, obviously, but at the time, me and my husband, we were trying to get pregnant, and so I was looking for something that would take me out of needing to sort of have to get clients all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, you know what, bring it on. So I sort of didn't really know what that job was going to be, but I just filled a couple of holes, which tends to be, I'm a bit of a facilitator, so, and project management is kind of my jam. So that sort of, it just lent in it. Well, what happened was I eventually just started sort of running our projects with Sonia and the editorial team, and I don't know, I got to start writing for the Copy Blogger blog as well. I think that was the day that post got published, that first one. It was a big moment, because obviously you go from, like, I knew nothing about marketing. I knew nothing about, I mean, I was always a good written communicator, but not in the sense of what people want to read online, or knowing how to craft some kind of, not life-changing, but at least an aha moment kind of blog, like the sort of ones I like to write. But that whole journey, it's really just been sort of trailing in Copy Blogger's wake of education, and I've loved it. And then since then, obviously, I've had my baby, and so I stopped working for a while there, and then the next big change at Copy Blogger happened. So that was sort of the time where we had to move on. Obviously, you guys wanted to drill down into that core team, and that was sort of how that ended. But obviously, I had Sonia. Sonia's one of my clients, and Brian's one of my clients. So I still get to keep that relationship with really two teachers who have had a really huge impact on, well, where I am today and what I feel like I can accomplish and that sort of thing. And obviously, my newsletter, which you mentioned, is obviously, it comes from a lot of Brian's and Sonia's teachings, and it was really fun to put together, and I love writing it. So I'm happy that you mentioned that, because it's a great newsletter. I honestly, because I write it, I sort of batch my drafts on Mondays, once a month, and I actually love that day, because all I do is read people's great blog posts, and because I obviously provide book snippets, and so I'm reading through book notes, and that's really where my they're my sort of flow states, research and writing. So it's a good combination when that day comes up.
I didn't realize, well, maybe I did, I'm not sure, which is why I like this podcast, because I get to ask these questions. Were you a writer beforehand, or did you?
Well, no, I wasn't. I worked in corporate finance. So I'm a systems person, like I'm quite technical. And so the creative aspect of just business and the online world was something that I battled with a lot. I had perfectionist tendencies. You sort of have to go through this learning curve of understanding what procrastination is, and your specific flavor of procrastination, and how you can push past that. And honestly, it was going through that learning process to become a writer was what helped me really see what I wanted to help people with, which is self-management, which is, I've really believe that it's just a skill that if you, like, we're not taught it in high school, obviously we're not taught it in college, we don't learn it in the workforce, or not in the jobs that I was in. And I think it is really crucial, especially if you're in business for yourself or self-employed. You need to know how to manage yourself and your projects and your psychology and your priorities, and obviously the rest of your personal life as well. So I think that journey towards learning how to write for the online community, or really more, I guess it was more an education in copywriting, because that's really where I've stuck most of my learning, because it weaves so well into the psychology side of things, which is something I'm just naturally really interested in. It just so happened that it all sort of came together with my project management stuff and feeling organized. And so self-management is now that sort of, if I feel like that's sort of my topic that I like to always explore, and whether I frame it for the copy blogger audience or the unemployable audience or my own audience, like it's quite, I think everybody needs to be a good self-manager. It doesn't really matter what you do. And it's become even more evident being a first-time mom and primary caregiver and still trying to earn an income from home. So it's yeah, but I definitely wasn't a writer to begin with. I wrote a lot of email, and I've been in customer service for a very long time. So I feel like I knew how to speak to people, but I didn't necessarily know how. I think everybody has to learn how to give advice, especially when you start sort of finding all of these new great knowledge that you want to share, and it's sort of getting over that hump of, I don't know, it's like my husband used to hate it when I was first sort of starting out, because I didn't know how to give advice, but I would always want to share what I'd learned. And he likened it to, I don't know if you've seen Frasier, but Frasier's sort of that character, like the know-it-all. So I always, that's when I felt like I was leaning too far towards Frasier, I always sort of try and dial it back a little bit. And I think I'm much better at giving advice now. It's obviously, I think that's also a skill, and becoming a teacher online is, sort of that next goal that I want to sort of tick off or work towards. And all of it is sort of coming into play now. Like everything I've learned, it's funny how it all just sort of weaves into what you want to do, and you sort of find all your connections and patterns. So yeah, but the learning to write, it was game changing. Like I know people use that word about really random things sometimes, but learning to write online, I think, is probably one of the best things that anyone can do, especially if, you're like me and an introvert and tend not to do well in networking events or putting yourself out there in just other forums. When you can control what kind of content that you want to create, and obviously push past any barriers, the internal barriers you might have in putting yourself out there, I think that's those two combined can really, you can build your own audience, which is, I guess, that's everyone's goal, right? We all want that audience so that we can eventually create stuff and sell stuff. And yeah, I'm still on that road. Still trying.
I guess the word is a fan of all of the things that you just said. One, like learning how to write. I talk about this a lot. I think everybody that knows me understands this about me. It's been, I don't know, like the best thing that I ever did. And
Absolutely.
in today's world where there's so much emphasis on just like video and glam and all of this, hey, look at me type thing,
Yeah.
where writing is a lot more subtle, I guess is a good word for it, but
Yeah.
much more like it's a skill both in self exercise, because you have to
Yeah.
actually like it's a practice of figuring out like what am I actually trying to say, and like how can I
Yeah.
say it in the best way possible. But it's also
Yeah.
a practice in like you said, where there's an art to, I have this thing to teach, and how can I frame it in a way so that my lessons are like most easily absorbed, I guess is the best way to put it. And it's not easy, like it really,
No, it's
really is
not.
hard. And so when you said I wasn't a writer, I was really shocked, because when you say that you have like those perfectionist tendencies, I kind of had this little vision of you working on like an 800 word blog post for like 7 hours, and I don't know how
No,
I could.
try like two and a half. It's like 2,500 words, and then going, okay, I really need to cut this. That's what I used to send Brian, and he posts them obviously, because Further is, when I was writing for Further, obviously that audience is probably a little bit more interested in long form.
Sure.
Where if you're going to write for like something like Fast Company or Forbes, they tend to like the short blog posts, and I don't really like them. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
me
not Seth
neither.
Godin. And I really like to give people meaty things that they can take home and sort of, I don't know, I like to give people as many options within whatever I write to do the thing that the post is, or whatever article I'm writing is trying to get them to do. But I like to give options, and you can try this, because
Nice.
I know that anecdotal advice, while it can be helpful to some, it really caters to what you've experienced rather than what someone else might benefit from. So
Hmm.
Yeah, I think my posts tend to be a bit long in that sense, but I hopefully that they've resonated with some people, and I know they have. Like I've had lovely emails from people, but I mean I haven't written a blog post since I published my last one with Coffee Blogger before giving birth. I think I handed it in to Stephanie at like a week before birthing my child.
You're like, I'm done.
Yeah, it was good though. No,
That's
it
great.
was, but it's been great because like I've just started to, or I'm in the process of writing a free email course for my audience um, on implementing the courses or that you choose to invest in online. And I've been able to curate so much of my own content because, you know, I've been able to write pretty evergreen posts. And I think self-management is, like I said, I love the topic. Like it's evergreen. I feel like it's almost infinite in what you can write about because, you know, people are always going to be struggling with something, and majority of the time it's internal, or at least that's where any sort of struggle tends to begin, even though we often think it's an external thing. It's that first obstacle tends to be
Sure.
on the inside. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and that was the second thing that I wanted to bring up because I love the idea of self-management. I feel like, and I don't want to like diss anybody here, but there's just so much out there where it's just like live your best life type content, you know? It's like you can do it, like woo woo hoorah.
Yeah.
I want to like inspire you, but I've always gotten more value out of advice or like experiential writing where it's a lot more defined, right? Like here are some practices that will help you make the most of your time.
Absolutely.
And that
I'm all
really
about
resonates with
giving actual practices and practical
for
advice like
sure.
that. I think if anyone ever wanted to go through all of, like, I think I've only written like 12 posts that I've sort of published out in the internet ether, but all of them I have always made sure that either whether it's at the end or not, it's always try this to see if it works, because you have to give people something practical to do. For me, that's the kind of post I like to write. I know there's other styles of
Me
writing,
too.
obviously, but for me it's I'm somebody who, like, I mean, my specialty is helping big thinkers become more effective doers, because we love being up in our own heads and it's really easy to think about amazing things, have great ideas, putting them into action, executing. We all have a little bit of a I don't know, a handicap there, maybe, just because, you know, there's a lot of things that have to line up in order for you to have that kind of focus that you want to, like, stay on that track towards something that's quite challenging, I think. So it's,
Yeah, 100%. And the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because of what you said, where it's not something that we're ever taught. Like I spend a lot of time thinking about random things, and I think my brain just moves too fast, and I need to work on that. But you know, I can't understand how, at least in our culture, I made it to be 22 years old and I was never actually given a set of curriculum where it's like, look, there's going to be so much information thrown at you every single day. And now in 2020, like overwhelming amounts
even
of
more.
information, you know? And so it's like, how the hell do you manage your ability to absorb all this information, make a plan, and
Yeah,
then like do it, right? And
exactly.
yeah, and
It
it's so
seems so
simple.
simple, but how?
Yeah, and
Exactly, and that's it.
I just feel like that message, like I said before, kind of manifests itself in this idea of, you know, you gotta wake up early and stay up late and like never quit, never surrender type thing. Where for me, it really hasn't been about that. For me, it's been like I just kind of do these habits and it's these same things every day that are pretty damn boring. But then when you do them over the course of years, I mean,
Yeah,
my newsletter is a perfect example. And like even this podcast, this is going to be my 102nd episode. And
yeah, that's
I've done
crazy.
it every week, you know, and it's not to say that the first one was great. And if I listen to some kind of motivational speech on like the fifth episode, then my
Yeah.
fifth episode was all of a sudden going to get all these like listeners. It's just the habit of I record it every Friday afternoon and I publish it every Monday, and that's like
Yeah.
really it.
But yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure you've read Atomic Habits, right?
I read the first
I
chapter, and
this chapter.
my wife's read it a bunch, but I bring that up because I died laughing when he talked about Brian Clark and his
Brian's
nails.
fingernails.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, I hysterically died. And when I brought it up to Brian, I'll
He
never
loves
forget,
it.
we were getting coffee, and the look on his face, he's like, "Can you fucking believe it?" It's like,
I brought it up because he visited Australia last year, I think. Yeah.
oh yeah,
Oh, year before. Anyway,
you guys
we
met up
caught up
then?
for a drink, and it was right when Atomic Habits came out, and I'm
Oh,
like, I
amazing.
had literally just read the chapter, and I was like, bro, you got. He's talking about you chewing your nails, and okay, do you still get manicures? No, he's
Yeah,
like, nah, I'm good now. Like, he obviously maintains himself, but a habit's a habit. Hey, got to kick the bad ones.
dying
But
laughing.
you're right. Like, just simple habits, I think, and that was part of the learning, my learning experience too. Like how do you know? Like, you don't really know. I guess we don't pay attention to our habitual behaviors
Mm-hmm.
until we're trying to do something and we literally can't do it. Like, you don't know why, but you cannot do it, and there's probably a bunch of things that are layering up, but that's stopping you. But for the most part, it's really, we need to strip back bad habits and try and replace them with some better habits. And I one of the I think it was probably around late 2016 is really where I stopped being so scared of putting my work out there, that I finally got back into a course that I was doing, and I finally shipped something, like literally finished a course, which I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us don't, like, so many people don't do. They sort of get halfway, love the theory, fly through that, practice comes, and it's no thank you, I don't want to do that, that seems scary, I might be shit at it, all of those sorts of things. But once I finally shipped my first my first guest post, I was like, oh, there's habits paying off, like writing down 10 ideas a day. I used to write headlines for, like, I used to do the 50 or 100 headlines a day for a little bit, or every now and then I just smash some out, just really try and get my brain working in a way where it was, you can record stuff. It doesn't have to be great, obviously, but the habit of actually just doing that work and writing to your email list. Or I used to do, when I sort of first got introduced to Chris Brogan, he used to have an exercise that doesn't matter what you write about, just write 300 words a day. So, I have all these Google Docs where I've just started to write, random shit. Like, it could have just been literally what I had done that morning, but you let that writing flow, and the habit of sitting down in front of the blank page and actually writing something, even if it wasn't going to be amazing or perfect or a blog post. It was just the act of writing was something that I needed to start getting comfortable with. And from there, that obviously evolved, and I'm better at now. But hey, I still struggle with a first draft, always. Like, I'm an editor for sure, polisher, editor. Yeah, but the draft is still a tricky one. So I usually I use a system called Personal Kanban for my tasks. It's visual, it's not digital at all, completely analog. I play with post-its all day basically. But I used to write a ticket. It's just 15 minutes of writing, and that one I'd set my alarm. It's probably the only time I really use that. I think it's the Pomodoro technique.
Mm-hmm.
Set that alarm, write some stuff out, see what I can get, and obviously breaking that down into appropriate steps is sort of how I've managed to build those. It's almost like those are habits as well. It's, you've got, once you have your system for how to get things done, that becomes a habit. And then once you've got a system for creating a blog post, the breakdown of how you write it, it becomes an actual system. So the habits and personal systems that you sort of cultivate as you grow, I think can be really important. So it's an area where I always like to focus. Like, I was having a really shitty week last week, and I realized that the days that were the worst were when I wasn't writing in my journal every morning, which I've done since 2016, but
Me
with the
too.
baby, sometimes it falls away. And so I was like, okay, I've got to rein that back. I got to start, I use the 5-minute journal. So it's super easy. And just as soon as I started doing that again, like, even if it was me just tricking myself into feeling more productive, it worked. I feel better this week. So yeah, I think those habits, like, and I think the other thing is that we forget about some of our good habits, which obviously works the other way. You don't realize you have bad habits, but things like just drinking water, or me and my husband put our phones away at 7 p.m. at night, or just, up and out of the way so we're not touching them. We still watch TV at night. That's not our, we're not a TV ban house, that's for sure. But I do have another little rule that I say no TV before 3. It rhymes and it works for me, because 3 p.m. was always that sort of cutoff where I don't work much anymore after that.
Yeah.
So all these little things that you don't realize, all these habits, and if you be a little bit more purposeful and deliberate with them, I think, you've seen the changes in yourself. I know the changes for myself. There's millions of books on habits. We know how powerful they are, but getting your own set, I think, is really, like, what I did is I tried sort of a bunch of everybody's advice. Like, I tried the Miracle Morning. I'm a huge Tim Ferriss fan. So Hal Elrod's the Miracle Morning guy, but they have a lot of overlap there in what they do with morning routines. And I think that that really came in handy when I was still working a corporate job as well, because you're trying to balance, the side hustle or whatever you want to call it at the same time. And that's where that discipline really comes in handy, because I mean, you've got to be way more strict with your time and your energy when you're juggling both things. And again, like, in this new level of life, obviously I work from home, but I have my toddler and all these habits. Like I said, the journaling thing from last week, when I didn't do it, I felt off. And so they can really, like, just make you feel a little bit more stable and on top of things. So I think they bring a little bit of structure at the same time. So
Yeah, and you mentioned,
habits.
well, and it's not just habits, because you're right. There's like a million books and there's a million people that talk about this, and I notice in myself, like, making my bed as soon as I wake up in the morning, I can basically tell how I'm feeling about myself by
Yeah.
how much laundry is in the hamper and if I made my bed in the morning. And like, I
Yeah.
swear to God, that's it. Like, because if I break those habits, I just know, like, I'm not in my zen. But
Yeah.
I also want to bring up, because I want to stay on this topic because it's so life changing for people. At least it was for me
Yes.
once they get it.
Same.
And my wife read all of Atomic Habits and she loved it. And she passed it to me and I read the first chapter, like I said. And in the first chapter, there was a line that said, "You don't rise to the level of your ambitions, you fall to the level of your
Level of your
systems."
systems. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I
as
know
soon as I
that.
read that, like, I have a weird OCD thing where I have to finish books. But as soon as I read that, I was like, I don't need to read anymore because I basically feel like
Yeah.
that's the most important thing that I can get from here. And I wrote it on my board. And like,
Me and my husband, because I had read it, like physically read it, but we read it on Audible with my husband, the first chapter actually. And
yeah, cool.
he literally is like, babe, capture that, write that one down. Like, the system, like, you fall to the level of your systems. And
Yeah.
it is just so true. And I think perhaps sometimes, I think, at least for me, like, the concept of personal systems in the beginning was maybe a little, like, I didn't really understand it so much.
Mm-hmm.
But once you can reflect on who you are and what you already do, and you'll often find the systems in there regardless. You'll also find the habits and behaviors that you fall back on, whether or not they're good for you or not. But then once you start understanding that, simply, getting my gym stuff together, like, I don't go to the gym, I'm just using this as an example, but getting your gym stuff together the night before is going to be better than searching for all that shit in the morning, because you're putting an obstacle in your way to getting to that
Yep.
sort of the result that you want, are really all the endorphins from exercising or something like that. And I think, and that in itself is just a little personal system. Me, like I said, I use personal Kanban for my task management. That is a huge system that works for me just amazingly. And when I found that in 2016, everything changed. Like, it's like, it was huge. but it would be so small compared, like, just in, like, if you just looked at it for what it was at that time, like, oh
Mm-hmm.
great, she started using post-its to organize her life. But it's like, it changed the game for how I worked, how I felt about my own project management skills, and I think that really bolstered my confidence for pitching to Brian, because what I was going to be pitching to him was my services to keep him organized, because that's not what he likes to do. He's not the
You
systems
noticed?
guy or the operations guy. We know this. He talks
Yeah.
about it a lot. So I was like, well, that's my opening. So I wanted to make sure that I had my system. So when you have a system to really get anything done, I think and then you can start to just consistently use it, which is the other part of it. You have to use the systems that you create. But it was really, really life changing. Like, I love personal Kanban. I plan on teaching students how I use it. So it's, yeah, really, really big for
Yeah,
me.
that's amazing. For me, it was for me, I take an inventory every night. It's a practice that I've done from a mentor. Like 10 years ago, I was going through some shit in my life, and he kind of taught me the importance of reflecting on your day and seeing what you could have done better, but also, like you said, seeing like what you did well, so that my
Yeah.
life isn't just like this process of me like beating the shit out of myself, you know?
Exactly.
And and this gets into the real system part. So I write down the 5 things I know I need to accomplish the next day, and then I always well, this one doesn't have anything in it yet. My wife always buys me like ridiculous notebooks because she likes to
I
make fun
love
of
it.
me. Yeah. For people listening, it's like a pink notebook and it says "Oh hi." But so then what I do is I always get these spiral notebooks and I do it just like this, and I leave
Yeah.
it right where I go to get my coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
And it's such a simple, subtle thing, but
Yeah.
it saves me all of the thinking in the
Decision
morning of like,
fatigue,
what do I got to
everything.
do today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll show you if we're doing show and tell.
Yeah.
This is
Great.
see that, the Kanban
Whoa.
board? So all the
Whoa.
post-its, I know exactly what I can work on. And I usually,
Wait, hold
obviously,
on. Go back there. I'm gonna take a
go
picture
back.
of that so I can put it on the show notes.
Hopefully there's nothing
Having a
embarrassing on
podcast
there.
is like seriously the coolest thing. Everybody needs to do this. All right, I got it.
Okay, good. I feel embarrassed about my workspace because
Because you
I
have a
don't know. I
kid.
haven't, because I've literally just sort of, I was on bed desk. So I used to just set up bed desk because my kid sleeps on me.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just migrated back into my office, and it's like, you can see there's a wonderful pram in the background and terrible lighting, and I feel great.
Yeah.
You're putting me to shame with your setups.
Oh, please.
No, but it's like,
Mm.
just having that. Like, I don't need a lot. I need my laptop. I need my board, and that's it. I could and my notebook. I'm a notebook person as well. But
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that. All right. I want to transition a little bit more to your work
okay,
because, you know, I got to tell a little bit of a story because I'm very like simple in content that I create. And in my newsletter, I spent so much time struggling with like the layout and the format of it. And I thought I
yeah,
had this idea where I thought I knew what I was doing and it was fine. I didn't have to think about it anymore. And this was a little while ago, and I remember you reached out to me basically saying congratulations about Copy Blogger, and so I signed up for Flourish. And then when I got the first email, and I guess
yeah.
this is probably going to relate to, you talked about that perfectionism thing, like it is laid out so perfectly every single time in like the same exact order. And as soon as it comes in, I'm always thinking to myself like, God damn, like mine is just, here's a link, here's what I think about it, and like here's another
But
link.
it's a completely different, like, you are different to me. Like, me, I think we can understand from my level of, organization-y love and project
Mm-hmm.
management. I like structure.
Yeah,
I mean, one of the things that I kept, like, that I caught on to, like, almost straight away with online writing, and what I learned from Brian about outlines and headings and subheads, is that structure helps, especially in an email, right? Like,
for
I'm really
sure.
big on structure in an email, because if you can't read it properly, like, why would you stick in an email that you don't like reading? You know what I mean?
You never would.
So I think I borrowed from a, a few, like, because I used to do the curation. I used to help Brian with his curation for the Unemployable newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when James Clear came out with his newsletter, his 321 newsletter, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, he's mixing the links, like, you know, like, obviously I love sharing resources, but I was like, oh, I like how he's got just some thoughts and ideas from people, like direct quotes. And so I started to mix that up a bit more because I felt like that was more in line with what I like to help people do. Obviously, I mean, I've got the system upgrade in there all the time, like whether it's just create a hydration habit, or, you know, whether I think I put bundling in there a lot the other week. So it's,
Yeah, and like the
I think
TLDRs.
once you do get the format, if you can push past the perfectionist side, it turns into something that you can really, it's quite easy to get out every week, but it's actually quite fun to just sort of slot in, and it's really easy to batch, just so you know.
Yeah.
You know, I just sort of do, like, I usually dedicate 4 weeks to a book, especially because a lot of them are a bit more lengthy now. So I know what I need. I get to read all that, and the book snippets go in really easily. I'm constantly curating. Like, I use Instapaper to capture links that I like that people share. And so I always have everything I can pull from. So I think it's those little systems within the bigger system that really help me there as well. Because I use Google Keep to capture any cool quotes that I find. Like, obviously I mine other people's newsletters. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I like to think of that I'm a curator of curators. So it's just, yeah, it's like getting to that, like, really sort of, oh, I like what he shared, so I'll take that. And I think it's good to have the structure because it makes it a lot easier. But yours is different to mine, and I think that's the part that often is really hard when you're battling the perfectionist thing, because you're like, the comparison, which I think I'm really flattered that you think of me in that in that part. But obviously your newsletter is something completely different to what mine is, and your people are expecting different things from you. So it's sounds like it sort of suits who you are. I mean, you're in a cap and a singlet, bro. I mean, you're pretty laid back. A
I'm pretty
link
laid
talking
back.
a little bit about it, you're good.
Yeah, I'm pretty laid back.
Whereas I think I'm a little bit on the, you know, I'm a bit controlling. Let's just say it. I'm a little bit controlling. I like to make sure everything is in its place.
A place for everything and everything in its place.
That's it.
Well, if it helps or if it makes you feel better, it was because of the perfect format of your newsletter that I actually took like 2 or 3 weeks and experimented with just my headers and my bullet points and like how I'm going to lay it out.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this just on your podcast. Like, honestly, I got it now, and it was.
Yeah. You feel good about it?
Yeah, I do. And I guess it's because you're in Australia, your newsletter came in when I go for a nightly walk. I had back surgery a while ago, and so I go for a walk every night to keep my back loose. And it was while I was walking, and I remember exactly where I was, and even what corner I was turning. I was like, "Fucking A!" Like, this thing is just laid out so perfectly. Like, I gotta do something.
Thank you. That's so nice of you to say. But really,
Yeah.
it's, and like, I mean, just talking about it's funny because we do, like, obviously you do too, you labor over those sort of really small details. But hey, it's appreciated, and it's really nice to hear that, because obviously I learned about, you know, the curation content strategy from Brian, and his both of his newsletters are really quite different, and I didn't want to just have I didn't want it to just be the same as that.
Yeah, me too.
And I wanted to add a little bit of my own flavor, and obviously I have a lot of other sources that I draw from. And like I said, you know, I liked James Clear's setup because his is all pretty much, his is very original. He's just a very clear thinker and does a lot of great writing. But I think just pulling a little bit of his style and a bit of Brian's style, and you just mix. And obviously Sonia is huge. Like, I think I hear Sonia and Stephanie a lot when I'm writing as well. Like, just because I like how they make their posts flow and how their writing flows. So I take that on board too. So I think it's all just a little bit of a mix of our influences, and then you come up with something that's actually you, which is nice.
Yeah.
Getting to
Agreed
the you
totally.
part.
Yes, agreed totally. So last on our great conversation, and thank you so much for sharing your time with me. We've gone through all of this and have yet to even really go into what your newsletter is about and like who you're trying and who you're trying to serve. So,
Who cares? No.
so
Well, I mean, you can see it on the copy in my homepage. So it's at peopleloveprojects.com.
yes, yeah, and
But
I
it's,
hesitated there because I kind of forgot the domain. I wasn't sure if it was called flourish.com or
yeah, well, I mean, ideally, in an ideal world, I would have come up with Flourish before I came up with
that's the way it
People Love
works though.
Projects. But
Hmm.
I like People Love Projects as my umbrella, so it's good. So Flourish is really for quiet achievers, and I borrow a little bit from Susan Cain's introvert book, Quiet, in that, it's for people who we like to keep our goals on the low down until they're actually sort of achieved, and then we like to share things. And I know, feel like I know that person quite deeply. We're lifelong learners. We struggle with the perfectionism, and obviously, but have a real, we're growth minded. Obviously, there's more to life than just being cookie cutter and staying on the same sort of path that, I don't know. I feel like it's the path that you'd be on if you just sort of followed in your parents' footsteps, or
Hmm.
whatever, whoever else has influenced you really early on in life. And some of us don't get like these, like, I mean, I didn't know that the online world of commerce and that, like, I mean, I knew it existed, but I didn't know it was just accessible, you know? Like, I purchased from ASOS all the time, but I didn't know that, they would have started in a very similar position. But that was sort of all I knew about online shopping, was just where I bought clothes from. And then then I started to just dive really deeply into like what that world was. I think it was YouTube beauty gurus, honestly, that sort of, I was like, wow, these girls are like putting their makeup on in front of people. People are watching, they're obviously partnering with companies and making money. And that was like, it was just like a tumbleweed from there. It just kept like gaining momentum. And I was just like fascinated with the, like, everything to do with the online world. And I think so many people are come in, like, a lot of people are having that sort of like that realization that there's a whole other world outside of working in an
Oh
offline
yeah.
business as an employee. They're discovering it, and then they get into it, and you're really gung-ho at the beginning, but everything comes crashing down if you don't know how to manage yourself, or get the projects that you want off the ground, or push past the fear and the perfectionist and the entitlement, tended, like, all of that sort of, it really can stop you from doing the meaningful work and creating, rather than just consuming all the time, which I think a lot of, I know a lot of self-employed people, and it's me included, who fall into that, or who fell into that trap in sort of maybe the first 2-3 years, where you're seeing all these people doing exactly what you want to do. I mean, you're learning from them at the same time, but sometimes it can really get you down, unless you start to develop that deeper sense of self-awareness. And then when you start to figure out, oh, I'm really good at that, once you start identifying your strengths, and you start to see patterns of where you've sort of succeeded in other areas using those strengths, and you've sort of learned how to pull them into your new world. And I think that was really, for me, that self-awareness. Like, I love psychometric testing. I feel like it's really nice to get that deep understanding of who you are, and it helps you form who you want to be. Because like, I mean, I'm still figuring out a lot of that, but I'm very, very, very focused in what I want to do now and what comes next. And like, my plan doesn't change. It's, for me, it's actual, my problem now really is time. Whereas before, I would probably use the excuse that I don't have time, but we have a lot of time. Like, pre-baby, I had so much time. I hate pre-baby Claire sometimes because she wasted so much time. And now I'm in this stage where it's like, I'm very, very, I know what I want to do. And now it's really all just about execution. And I think that's what it comes down to. figure out how to manage yourself, figure out how to manage the psychology, and develop the habits and the personal systems that will actually help you make it so much easier for you to actually achieve what you want to. Like, I mean, systems are basically your recipes for success. So
Yeah.
it's the better ones that you can cultivate, the better off you'll be. So I think that was huge for me. And obviously the self-awareness really helped me shape the kind of work that I wanted to do, at least definitely with client work, of where I could where I knew I'd be able to slot in and sort of find that opening with people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, I think understanding that not everybody is obviously as organized and loves project management as much as I do was really eye-opening. Because like, oh, it was, you always assume people can do what you can do, but a lot of the time they can't. So, and especially because I work with a lot of creatives, so my technical side really comes in. It's quite valuable in that when I have that relationship. So, and that's where it's obviously with Brian and Sonia, they're both very creative minded, tend to not want to worry about the technical side too much, or at least they'll hire out for that. So finding those opportunities really helped me sort of catapult my career trajectory anyway. So that was just that deep sense of self-awareness, I think, is where everybody should start, because that's really how you flourish. And all of that sort of stuff, that's what I cover in my newsletter. So we cover great books, we talk about how to upgrade your systems, how you can self-coach yourself. Like, I'm a big fan of self-coaching. So like you do with your setup every night, like that's a form of self-coaching. I mean, you're setting yourself up for a really great day the next day. So all that sort of stuff, reflection is deliberate, practice is deliberate. So weave it in to your everyday routine. And I think that's how you sort of, like you said, it's incremental, but you get, like, I'm 5 years in now, like that to me is already crazy, but I'm 5 years in now, and I know I'm a just completely different person to who I was when I was still working in corporate finance.
Yeah, and to finish up the thing that you said, which really hits home with me because I see it so often, and the longer that you start creating content for people, you're going to see it too. It's like this weird, I don't know exactly what you call it, because you spend so much time consuming, and it's kind of half learning, getting inspired, half like this sick self comparison thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and uh, I was pretty fortunate, and I'm not, there's plenty of flaws that come with this personality trait, but I've never really had that like approval seeking thing in me.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that, because when I got into Copy Blogger and I started writing, it made it so that little voice wasn't so naggy. But
Yeah.
it's it's tough when I try to work with people and so much of their time is spent with this sharing videos or sharing inspirational quotes, and just this idea basically that like I should do it like this. And it's
Yeah.
not until, and maybe you need that, and maybe you need that experience to figure out, like I did, like you did,
That's
that
not working.
yeah, exactly, that you just have to kind of start doing stuff. And
Yeah.
it's that constant like failure of it. I mean, just for instance, like even talking about where like I saw how you
Yeah.
formatted your thing, and I learned so much from Brian, but it's there's just a difference between like the learning and that
The
constant just,
implementing.
yeah, exactly, and like the implementing where you
Yeah.
get past the point of like I'm just gonna soak in all of these ideas and all of this advice. Like it's like motivation zombies kind of. I
Yeah.
just
And
don't
I actually
always.
I remember I started to feel really restless. Like
Sure.
I was like, oh, I want to do that. Like I think you get to the point where it becomes enough. Like you're done with the inspiration, and you've now, like, it's crossing over into motivation. And so you got to battle and turn off that inner critic, just and create something. And I think that was just like I said, as soon as I sent off my first guest post and it was accepted, like it was like amazing. But prior to that, I had to pitch and get rejected first,
Yeah.
So take take the loss first so that you can get the get the win afterwards. And I think the more you lose or the more you get rejected, it's probably better for you because that resilience builds. But in saying that, I think it's better to get rejected than to do nothing at all, which is what I did for so long. In terms of doing things that were going to build my credibility and my authority in the space that I wanted to be in, you just have to push past the inner struggle, and there are ways to do that. Like, that's where the personal systems, your habits all come into that, and you can absolutely do it, but you have to be ready to create at the end of it, so and again, small steps, create in, like, break down your projects, break down your tasks, make them small, make them doable. Use the Pomodoro technique if you need to, but tactics are tactics, and they can work for some, others won't. But just, my thing is, put yourself out there and create. Try and manage the fear as best as possible.
I really admire and appreciate that. Like, I just like when people say things because they actually do them.
Yeah.
It's so stupid to say, but there's so much of like, oh, just, it's like the kind of thing where I'm going to create online courses to teach you how to sell online courses, to tell
Yeah.
other people, but like, you're different because you're actually creating these content and you're having ideas that you're putting into the world and like figuring it out. And I think that's just a way better recipe than diving into this constant like loop of where's the
Stream
value,
yeah.
So I even in this hour of talking to you, like, I can tell I really admire that about you, and
Well, thank
you're doing
you.
great. So congratulations. Yeah.
That's really nice. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, Claire, thanks again for the last minute.
Yeah, no worries.
Keep up the amazing Twitter feed. Like, I really, really mean that. It's the only ones where I ever show my wife, and I'm like, look how ridiculous this video is, you guys.
All right, I'll make sure that we keep the comical stuff in there. Twitter gets a bit serious for my liking sometimes, so you got to share the shit. So yeah. Anyway, it's really, thank you so much for having me on. It's been great.
Oh, my pleasure. We'll do this again. So
yes,
keep in touch.
For sure. And maybe something more planned.
Yeah. All right, Claire. See you later.
See you later. Thanks.